Hello and welcome to the 9th video of creating a matrix style animation or widget. So the first thing we're going to do is have a quick look at what we are going to be making. Okay, so we're going to be making this matrix style widget where it converts between two phrases and generates random characters while converting. So in this video we're going to be looking at how we did this using JavaScript. So let's look at what we've done so far and what we'll be doing in this video. Okay, so far we've already made our JavaScript object, we've got our front-end widget, we have created our phrase array. We have not done the loop that we continuously loop through this phrase array, sending the new array into our JavaScript yet, so we haven't done that. We have added the attributes to our JavaScript object. We have finished the first method, which gets all the important text data that we need. Do remember that if you want to know why this is important, look at the video 6 that explains the logic behind the animation. In this one, we're going to be looking at this animation phase for animating the phrase method. So we're going to be looking at how we can do this. Okay, and then in the future we need to create a new random method that helps us select that random character from our attribute. So that's the plan. Our main task today is create the variables below. Once we've done that, we need to make sure that we loop through the data array, the all data array that we created in our last method, and we need to place them into their correct variables in our new method. We then need to use if statements to find out what we need to change, and then we need to create a new method that randomly picks that character for the animation and then display the finished output into the widget front end. So these are the tasks that we're going to be doing today. Okay, so we're at the matrix folder and we're going to be working with the files that we created in the previous videos. Again, if you want to get these files to work from them, you can click on the description area below and find the link to get the code that we've already created. So we're going to go to the JavaScript folder and go to the main JavaScript file, and then we're going to look at our tasks. So our first task is to create the variables below. So we need to create an output variable. So we're going to be using this variable to add to this variable, and then at the end output it, and then we're going to create a flag for the progress of our animation. So we need to create two variables in our new animate phrase method. Okay, so if we've done it here, we've just created our first variable called output and the second one called complete. So that was very easy, so we can take that off. Now we need to loop through all the data array and place the data into variables. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looping through that class all data array here, and then assigning the values in it to the variables that we need to create. So in this one, this for loop is slightly different to some normal ones. For example, this, where we only have one variable as a counter. What we've done here is we've created the first variable as the counter, and then we've added a second variable as the second value in our condition. So it's very similar to the one up here, but instead of putting this long one in the condition, I've just added a second variable there, and then still the condition is the same. If this is correct, it'll execute the code, and then it will increment the I value by 1. So I'm just showing you that you can actually have two values, two variables created in the first segment of that for loop. So we've created our loop that will iterate through this array of arrays, And now what we need to do is we need to take that data for each array and put it into values that we'll be using. So instead of using a lot of lines to, creating a lot of variables and then assigning that into each variable, what I've done is I've just created this in one line. So I've said this is a new variable, this is a new variable. All of the variables are going to be let because we're going to be using changing this data quite frequently. And I'm saying in the first array, all the values in the first array, the first value will go here, the second value will be here, third value here, fourth value here, and fifth value here. So if you know how many values are in this array, you can do this. So we've looped through all data array and placed the data into its variables. Now what we need to do is use if statements to check to see if the characters need changing. So we have to use this frame, and then we have to compare it to these values that we've created here. So we don't want to go back. I'm missing something. I'll just add the array there in my comments so you can understand what I do. And then so the first if statement is just saying, look, if this animation end value is greater or equal to the frame, we want to output that character. So that new character that we've stored earlier on, we want to put that character onto the output. Now we don't want it to equal the output. We want to just add that onto the output. So when we use this plus equals, we're saying this is going to be added on to the value here. So in this way we can slowly increase the length of this output. And because we have converted one, do you remember every time one is converted, we need to increment, and this is what that plus plus does. It means adding one to this value. So it's saying add one to this value. So the complete flag, I've spelled flag wrong, will be increased by 1. So we have now just done the first if statement, and then now we need to create the other if statements for the animation start and then the else. So that's what we need to do. Okay, so the next if statement that we have to do is we need to say, well, if the value, this frame, is greater than the start, or is greater than the animation start, we need to create, we need to add a randomly picked character to be displayed. So what we need to do before we can do that is we need to actually create a new method that allows us to pick that random number. So what we need to do now is we need to go down and create a new method. So we need to make sure we have the right one. So first we close off the else if, we close off the loop, we close off the additional method. So let's just kind of make sure it's all looking better. And now we can create a new method, and that's just make random character. So what this does is when you call this, it looks at this attribute at the top here, and then it says, well, I want you to get one of these values. So this is a random number that it will be generated. So do remember, as I said previously, online you can find so many different ways to kind of generate random numbers. If you want to try and generate a random number between a specific length that is kind of dynamic, so for example, if you add more values here, this code will still be able to find the number between the length here. So what this does is this picks a random number between the minimum and maximum length, so 0 and the maximum length, and then it returns this to the call. So what we're going to do now is we can just call this in here. So we say we can create a new character called random character, or we use the same one. And we just want to say this because it's part of the class, and we want to say make random character, and that will generate a random character for us if this frame is greater than the animational start value. Now, if you don't understand why I'm using these values, then you really need to look at that video 6, because it does explain what the logic behind this is. And then what we need to do after that is we need to make sure that we output that random character again back onto that output value. So we're going to say, look, if a value has been changed and we create a random output, we need to output that onto this variable here. Okay, the last thing that we need to do is we need to say, well, else, if nothing else happens, put the old character onto the output. So then what will happen is the first iteration, the first time this is called, it'll go through the array, and it will make the first frame and within that frame it will decide which characters should be changed, which should be kept the same, and which should be moved into a random character, and then we'll display that output into the main front end widget. So that's the last thing that we need to do, is that after the for loop, once the for loop is done, the output should be complete, and we just need to say, well, let's put that output back onto that front end widget here. Okay, so once we've iterated through the array, and we've changed each character for the first frame, let's output that back into the frame. So we have created our if statements. We've added the new method to randomly picked our characters, and we have displayed the finished output into our widget front end. So we've done all the tasks, but there are a couple of things that we could do to improve this code. So the issue with this code at the moment is that with this frame is greater than the animational start, is that there will be a point, especially in the middle, where the majority of characters are within that animational start. So they're higher than animational start, but lower than animational end, which means that there'll be a lot of conversion, and it could actually look a little bit chaotic. So we want to limit the amount of conversion happening during this time. So what we could do, for example, is we could add another random feature. So if, for example, here we have, just a little bit earlier, this one. So under that, if we add another if statement, and we say, look, if this frame, so in this frame, if the animation is greater than the animational start for that character, execute this code. And then if this is 30%, if the chance, so then the second if is like, it's a 30% chance. So it will decide if we should be animating or changing that random number. So look at that and say, well, maybe for this frame, only 30% of the animations that we could animate will actually change. So this is a way of kind of just making sure that not all the characters that can change will change every single frame, and it will just add a little bit more, I guess it'll be less jittery through the animation. However, this does create a problem because the potential ones that could not start changing could be the ones that we want to change initially, because we don't want the random numbers or the random characters to change each time, but we do want the first change to occur. Yeah, so as soon as this frame is greater than the animation will start, we do want the initial change, but then after that we don't want it to change each time. We want it to change maybe 30% of that time. So what we can do is we can actually change that if statement that I've added to a little bit more complicated one. So we can say, like, if, there we go, we get this, and we're saying that if the random character is empty, so if it's empty or null, like for example this, then we'll run this, and then if it's not empty, if it's full, then we will still have a random 30% chance of doing it. Yeah, so it's using these two conditions for it. But this means that we have to make sure that once we have the value, we need to put that value back into the main array. Yeah, so once we create that random value has to go back into the main array, because if we just keep it into this random character, this changes each time it loops round. We want something that's a little bit more fixed, so we're going to put that back into that random character value here, or the random character value here. And the reason why I've put two positions here is the first position is saying I want this array, and then the second one is that within that array I want the fifth. So you got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. You got the fifth value. So I'm inserting this information into the fifth value. So if we do that, it allows us to kind of still convert all of the characters once that animation start value is hit, but then after that it will start taking a random percentage to make sure that each frame that occurs after that, a new random character isn't generated, so it makes it a little bit more smoother, the animation. Okay, so I think we've done all our 5 tasks, and we've created our output. We haven't done anything with our complete flag yet, except for make sure it's incremented by 1 if the first if condition is met. We've looped through our array. We've created a list of values based on that array. We've then used one if else to determine whether we should convert it into the new character, make a random character, or use the old character. We've then created a random method that we can use to create our random character, and then at the end, finally, in the animate phase method, we have displayed the output onto the inner HTML of our object. So those are the 5 tasks for this video. So now it's time for some concept checking questions. Okay, so here are the concept checking questions. I think if you can answer all 5, you have a quite good understanding of what the code does. So let's stop the video and see if you can answer it, and then check your answers with mine. So hopefully you've paused the video and answered the questions. Let's go through them. So you can assign multiple values in an array to multiple values with one line of code if you know how many values are in that array. All you need to do is, again, put that, you have to define what kind of variable you want it. So for example, if you want it to be constant or let or var, and then you need to put the brackets, and within the brackets label your variables. So you just need to make sure that the number of variables you've created matches to the array values. Second one, how do you create a for loop that has 2 variables in it? Well, you can just make sure that you add the variables into the first segment of the for loop. Now this can be very helpful if your condition is maybe more, the calculation is a little bit more difficult, as it were. So at the moment, like this one, you know, it's just greater, or sorry, less than. It's not particularly difficult, and therefore you probably could just use that that within that that value there. However, sometimes you can get some very more convoluted, difficult conditions, and then that may be a good way of defining all your variables first, and then using the just the values or the letters to create your convoluted condition. What does this code do? What we're going to do here is we're going to go online. There's quite a lot of screens there, and I think it's obvious that it adds or concatenates 2 strings together. So it's saying add this string to this string and then insert that the combination of those strings together. But what I thought would be useful is to know that you know, JavaScript does have concat method, but instead of using this concat method, this string.concat, it's strongly recommended to use the plus equals sign instead of this method for efficiency purposes. So you can use this method to kind of add 2 sentences together, and then the result of that put into the value. That's perfectly okay, but efficiency reasons, this is probably better. Again, they talk about it down here a little bit, saying it before you could use it by using join, but nowadays it's recommended to use plus or plus equals. To check whether there's any value, well, we could have said this one, so we could have done 3 equals, you know, to decide if it's empty. So what we could say that as long as it's empty, this would have done absolutely fine. If we go down, we can say here, this one, which is what we did, we use this not thing here. This just checks if it's kind of empty or whether it's undefined. So potentially it could have been better for me to have used that, as it should not be undefined or null, it just should be empty. So potentially in my code I could have swapped that condition for this. Okay, so if we go back, the last one is where is there it is, the last one. Why are there 2 positional values in this code? If we look here, if we have to think of it like a table here, so that first value is the row and the second value is the column. So what's happening is we're iterating through the rows. So we're saying, like, if it's 0, 0, that would be this one. If it's 0, 1, that would equal that one. If it's 1, 0, it would be the second row and the first value of that column. So that's why we have these two positional values as like a 2D array, as it were. Okay, so I think we've covered all the concept checking questions. If you were able to answer them all right, that's brilliant. And I think you've got a good idea of the code that we've created today. If you found this video interesting or helpful in any way, and you want to know if you want me to create more videos like this, please subscribe so I know that there are people out there who are interested in them. Leave a comment or a like so again that I can feel that that these videos are helping people, and if they are, I'll continue making them. So enjoy, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.